Should you use molasses in the garden? And how should you use it? There are numerous claims online, and people use molasses in many different ways. Organic gardeners recommend that you add it to compost piles. Mix it in with your compost tea. Spray it on the soil, or spray your plants with it. When added to compost and compost tea, it increases the microbe population. When sprayed on plants, it gets rid of pests. Spray it on the soil and you get a microbe population bloom. And we all know microbes are important for soil development. But do any of these methods really work? And should you be doing this? Molasses is a byproduct from making sugar. So we take sugar cane or sugar beets, we grind them up, we process them, we extract most of the sugar out of it, and what's left is a black gooey material. That's molasses. This material still has a fair amount of sugar in it. It has various carbohydrates, some proteins, some vitamins, but the majority of it is water and sugar. It also contains some minerals like calcium and iron. What about sulfur molasses? What's that? Manufacturers used to add sulfur dioxide into the molasses to preserve it. The sulfur dioxide was adding the sulfur. Molasses on its own has very little sulfur. Modern day manufacturing doesn't use the sulfur in most cases. Molasses is quite stable on its own and doesn't really need it. So when you buy molasses, you can get it with or without the sulfur. Now that's really important when it comes to spraying for insects, because it's the sulfur that's getting rid of the insect. And if you buy molasses without sulfur, well, of course that isn't going to work. Let's have a closer look at some of the things we can do with molasses in the garden and see which ones work. Is molasses good for microbes? Microbes are opportunistic in that their populations will increase and decrease as the conditions change. Let's assume you have not been doing too much in the garden, so conditions are not changing. In that case, the microbe populations remain steady. Things are chugging along at a normal pace, and everybody is happy. What happens when you dump a lot of molasses on the garden? Instantly, microbes sense the extra food and they start to multiply. Bacteria in a lab can divide, doubling the population every 20 minutes. The population is exploding very quickly. All those bacteria need to eat, and they quickly consume the molasses you added. As the food source runs out, there is a massive famine, and most of the bacteria die. What has the molasses accomplished? Not much. All of the dead bacteria indeed go on to feed other microbes, and they help build soil structure. The minerals in the molasses stay in the soil, and plants can use them, but your soil probably had enough calcium and iron before you added the molasses. The vitamins in molasses are of no value to plants. The burst of microbe growth is short-lived and adds very little value to the garden, and it won't increase the microbe population except for a very short period of time. You might be thinking that molasses is organic and therefore it must be good for the garden. Organic fertilizers are good for the garden because they decompose slowly, feeding both microbes and plants over a long period of time. However, adding molasses sugar does not do that. Does it make sense to add molasses to a compost pile? It does not add much in terms of nutrients, but people like adding it to grow microbes. As noted above, it does not work since the sugar is used up too quickly. Sugar is also easily washed out of the pile with the first rain. Will molasses keep pests away from plants? There might be some benefit here if the molasses contains sulfur, because sulfur compounds are known to repel insects. One problem with this solution is that sugar attracts insects, like ants, who use it as a food source. Sugar can also lead to black mold growing on leaves, which can harm the plant and attract insects. Even if the sulfur repels insects, there are better options. Sprays of garlic or onion juice would be much more effective, and they don't contain as much sugar. Proponents of compost tea like to add molasses during the tea-making process. They believe that it results in higher microbe numbers, and they are right. The sugar in molasses is candy for microbes, and they gorge on it. I don't think molasses is any better for this job than white sugar or other simple to digest organic matter. The main reason for adding molasses to the garden is to increase the microbe population, and that is good for soil development. When we're trying to grow microbes in our soil, we do want organic material, but we want an organic material that breaks down slowly over time. Compost, manure, those are great. Even mulch is a good addition. Molasses just doesn't last very long and doesn't really do very much. You're better off with some other kind of organic material that will decompose slowly. And quite frankly, my favorite is compost and wood chips for mulch. I have another issue with using molasses in the garden. Molasses is a food product. We can eat that. Food products should be kept in the fridge. Let's use things that we wouldn't eat in the garden, like manure. These other forms of organic matter are just as good for microbes as molasses. So keep it in the fridge and use it for making cookies. If you'd like to find out a better way to increase the microbes in your soil, have a look at this video right here. Happy gardening.